Our topic for this project was a Russian peasant living through the first phase of Lenin's Russian Revolution. Vladimir Lenin, born April 22, 1876, was the head of the Russian Republic from 1917 to 1918, head of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic from 1918 to 1924, and head of the Soviet Union from 1922 to 1924. He overruled Russian Tsar Nicholas II in 1917, and then he took over and ruled over the Communist Party in Russia. Russian workers were very low paid and worked 11 hours a day. They were the worst treated workers in all of Europe during the 1920s and also during Lenin's rule over the Communist Party in the Soviet Union. The peasants started revolting against the Bolshevik power in March 1921 and tried to overrule the Communist Party and their government. The serfdom was based on agrarian economy. The peasants worked on the land of their masters, and this left them barely any time to take care of their families with the land that was given to them. The lords of the land divided the land by peasant commune. Each peasant's family had their own strip of field so they could feed the rest of their family. The number of strips they got was according to the number of male workers in the family or the number of mouths to feed at home. The peasants believed, even though they were wrong, that, quote, "we belong to the masters, but the land is ours." The peasants had a culture of their very own which was very different from French-speaking and more Western educated people. Their culture was based mostly on village life and agricultural year. The church and folklore also gave a lot of support to peasant culture. Peasants and serfs could also be conscripted and sent off to war by their lords. Many male servants were sent to the imperial army as punishment for insubordination, and the parameters for this charge were set by the peasant's lord. Russians during this time believed that women should only listen to God and it was God's will to be at home or to work in the factories or anything they had to do that may be a bit difficult. They would receive food, family, and a place in the village to live if she accepted God's will during the Russian Revolution. During the revolution, there were no Russian women revolts. Both men and women were unified to establish a dictatorship under Vladimir Lenin's rule. There was a lot of propaganda targeted towards women so they could support the communist reign in Russia, and this gave Lenin's party a lot of structure against other enemy groups like the Capitalist Party. Women workers stayed under the radar while the other two social powers were trying to fight against each other for total control over the Soviet Union. They stood by while the economy was collapsing and the world around them was falling apart at the time.
Nestor Makhno was born on October 26, 1888. He was a Ukrainian anarchist revolutionary and the commander of an independent anarchist army in Ukraine during the Russian Civil War of 1917 to 1922. As commander of the Revolutionary Insurrectionary Army of Ukraine, commonly referred to as the Makhnovia, Makhno led a guerrilla campaign during the Civil War. Makhno fought all factions which sought to impose any external authority over southern Ukraine, battling in succession the Ukrainian nationalists, the Imperial German and Austro-German occupation, the Hetmanate Republic, the Russian White Army, the Russian Red Army, any other smaller forces led by Ukrainian Ottomans. Makhno and his movement repeatedly attempted to reorganize life in the Hula-Pole region along anarchist lines. However, the disruptions of the Civil War precluded any long-term social experiments. Although Makhno considered the Bolsheviks a threat to the development of anarchist free territory within Ukraine, he twice entered into military alliances with them to defeat the White Army. In the aftermath of the defeat of the White Army in the region in November 1920, the Bolsheviks initiated a military campaign against Makhno, which concluded his escape across the Romanian border in August 1921. After a series of imprisonments and escapes, Makhno finally settled in Paris with his wife Halna and his daughter Yelena. In exile, Makhno wrote 3 volumes of memoirs. Makhno died in exile at the age of 45 from tuberculosis-related causes. He also credited as the inventor of the takana, a horse-drawn platform mounting a heavy machine gun. Nestor Makhno was born into a poor peasant family in Hulialpi Yekaterinslav Governorate of the Russian Empire. He was the youngest of 5 children. Church files show a baptism date of October 27, 1888, but Nestor Makhno's parents registered his date of birth as 1889 in an attempt to postpone conscription. His father died when he was 10 months old. Due to extreme poverty, he had to work as a shepherd at the age of 7. He studied at the second Huliapi primary school in winter at the age of 8 and worked for local landlords during the summer. He left school at the age of 12 and was employed as a farmland on the estates of nobles and on the farms and of wealthy peasants or kulaks. At the age of 17, he was employed in Huliap itself as an apprentice painter, then as a worker in a local iron foundry, and ultimately as a foundryman in the same organization. During this time, he became enveloped in revolutionary politics. His involvement was based on the experience of injustice at work and the terrorism of the Tsarist regime during the 1905 revolution. In 1906, Makhno joined the anarchist organization Hulialpi. He was arrested in 1906, tried, and acquitted. He was again arrested in 1907 but could not be incriminated, and the charges were dropped. A third arrest came in 1908 when an infiltrator was able to testify against Makhno. In 1910, Makhno was sentenced to death by hanging, but the sentence was commuted to life imprisonment and he was sent to Buchkasy prison in Moscow. In prison, he came under the influence of his intellectual cellmate, Pyotr Archinov. He was released from prison after the February Revolution in 1917. Ukrainian anarchist guerrilla bands were active during the Russian Civil War. Some claimed to be loyal to the Ukrainian state, but others acknowledged no allegiance. All fought both Red and White Russians with equal ferocity in the opening stages of the Civil War. Of all the anarchist groups, the most famous and most successful was that of the peasant anarchist leader, Nestor Makhno, who began operations in the southeastern Ukraine against the Hetamanti region in July 1918. In September, he formed the Revolutionary Insurrectionary Army of Ukraine, or Anarchist Black Army, with arms and equipment largely obtained from retreating Austro-Hungarian and German forces. During the Civil War, the Black Army numbered between 15,000 and 1,100,000 men, and was organized on conventional lines with infantry, cavalry, and artillery units. Artillery batteries were attached to each infantry brigade. Makhno's cavalry incorporated both regular and irregular horse-mounted forces, and was considered among the best trained and most capable of any of the cavalry units deployed by any side in the Russian Civil War.